One of the areas that continues to pop up in our conversations over time is the relationship between science and mysticism. I think we should be using this word mysticism as Kailash brought up in one of his comments. And we should talk a little bit about this. Because mysticism is one of these words that really has, its meaning has changed a great deal over the centuries, and now has become so sort of personalized that it has become almost a total abstraction. But as Kailash introduced in one of his comments, that it's originally a Greek word coming from, I believe, mystikos. Correct me if I'm wrong about this, Kailash. And the way that it was used originally in Greek was referring to the Christian mystery cults. And it was usually used in one of three ways, or actually a combination of the three ways. Number one, referring to the interpretation of Scripture in such a way that it went beyond historical circumstance and had a deeper esoteric meaning. This is a curious aspect, because even though the same kind of concept is applied to Indian scripture, there's a very different set of circumstances that exists here. And the one that stands out in the forefront is the fact that we're dealing with, on one hand, a literary tradition, and the other hand, an oral tradition. So we have a text, the Bible, that says a specific thing, and the first aspect of this mystikos is discovering God's message, as it were, or God's universal message beyond the historical circumstances of the Bible. The second would be in the performance of the Eucharist, in the mystical connection with the divine through the Christian ritual, the Eucharist. And the third would be the more experiential aspect of mysticism, which has come to dominate mysticism post-William James in the 20th and 21st centuries. A contemplation and experience, including visions and so forth, as was experienced much later on by Teresa of Avila and other Christian mystics.
Babaji?
Yes.
I think it might be useful to point out that mysticism, centrally in that last sentence, has to do with mystical union, the integration of divine and all else, or of the recognition of the divine as everything. And the felt sense, the intimate sense of infinite connection with that one. It's this notion of the tying together, the connection, is consistent with the Sanskrit notion of yoga, from which we get both yoga and yoke, in the sense of connecting oxen to pull a plow. And even in the Latin root for religion, we have religare, which means to tie together as with cords. So yoga, religion, mysticism, and especially in this sense of union, they have a common sense, felt sense of meaning.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's excellent. However, we have to be a little bit careful of that, because as mysticism, the use of the word mysticism and the thinking about it changes in the 20th century, post William James, post the publication of the Varieties of Religious Experience by William James, and post the heavy psychoanalytical influence on thinking at the time, and William James, of course, was in the forefront of all that. There arises a perennialism. Perennialism basically means that there is a common element that links the mystics of all the various religions, that they are experiencing the same thing, or they have the same goal, or one of these kinds of things. Aldous Huxley wrote his famous book in, I believe, 1946 on perennialism, in which he took the major religions of the world, and he took some of the writings of some of the mystics of those various religious traditions, and put them all together in a book side by side, and you could say, well, look how similar all of these things sound to each other. There must be a common thread that links all these various mystical traditions of all these various religions. There are some serious problems with that, of course. One of which is the nature of Aldous Huxley's text itself. And mind you, Aldous Huxley was one of my favorite people ever, so I have no criticism of him as a human being, but I am highly critical of his text, Perennialism, because the selections of the texts, of course, are selections. An editor made decisions of which sections of which texts we should compare. Then the next thing that you may notice when you go over this text is that all of the translations are basically written in a similar style, which is sort of a biblical style. You'll notice this, for example, if you read translations of Sanskrit texts, especially in the 19th century. Very often the translators will use these and thous and haths and all sorts of King James Version Bible English in the translation. And although you can say, well, this is just a style of a translator, it also, I think, leads people to automatically go into a certain kind of mode. So the third thing about perennialism that I'm critical of, that I can point out, is that in reducing the various religions or the mystical aspects of those religions to elements that can be identified in each of the other traditions, the elements become so reduced that they are virtually unrecognizable in any of the traditions that they're coming from. But that's all beside the point. I wanted to actually go back to the 17th century, where or actually, let's go back even 150 years or so before that, to the time of Martin Luther.